In one of his trips to the United States, John Stott, the late Anglican pastor and preacher, said this: "You know what your own country is like. I'm a visitor, and I wouldn't presume to speak about America, but I know what Great Britain is like. I know something about the growing dishonesty, corruption, immorality, violence, pornography, the diminishing respect for human life, and the increase in abortion. Whose fault is it? Let me put it like this. If the house is dark at night, there is no sense in blaming the house. That's what happens when the sun goes down. The question to ask, where is the light? If meat goes bad, there is no sense in blaming the meat. That is what happens when the bacteria are allowed to breed unchecked. The question to ask is, where is the salt? If society becomes corrupt like a dark night or stinking fish, there's no sense in blaming society. That's what happens when fallen human society is left to itself and human evil is unrestrained and unchecked. The question to ask is, where is the church? Ooh, that's strong, isn't it? That's strong language. But I think this is what Jesus is talking about in this verse that you have here in front of you. You are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. So what I want us to do here this morning is to look at three things, three uses of salt, common everyday salt, and how they apply to our living right here in our culture. And the three are: salt is a preservative. The second one is salt enhances taste. And the third one is salt makes you thirsty. So salt is a preservative, salt enhances taste, and salt makes you thirsty. So first, salt is a preservative. So before electricity came about, there was no way to preserve food, and so salt was used as a preservative. Essentially, what happens is that salt draws out the moisture in food, which prevents all of the microbes from growing and reproducing and all these things, and it allows the food to last longer. So without some kind of agent, the microbes will permeate whatever food you have, and it'll rot. And it's very dangerous to eat, obviously, rotten meat. In his book, Habits of the Heart, Robert Bellah talks about the historical development of individualism in the United States. Early on, because of the Puritans, there was an emphasis on community, on Christian community, actually, but you were evaluated, your identity came by your place in the community. And then when the Republic was formed, there was a commitment to civic engagement, and people were all over the place involved. Again, their identity was formed based on the community around them, their place in the community. That transformed gradually under the influence of Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke, where the emphasis became the sanctity of the individual and the primacy of personal liberty. I've been hammering this for weeks and weeks and months and months and months, just to give you the difference. The sanctity of the individual and the primacy of personal liberty. And this is essentially what lay the groundwork for the many expressions of individualism that are part of American society today. It's my truth, my way, my identity based on my feelings, my body, my me. And truthfully, we're about to implode. Maybe not today or tomorrow or next year or in a decade, but at this rate, our society won't last. And that isn't just true biblically. I think it's demonstrable historically. I think you can look back at the great empires of the world, and they all became about their rights, and they imploded. That's the path that we're on. So what does that have to do with our being salt in our world? Well, we are called salt. A salt that preserves. Jesus doesn't say we're becoming salt. He doesn't say we might be salt. He says, you are the salt of the world. If you claim to be a Christ follower, you are the salt of the earth. Full stop. So what does that look like? What does that look like? I can't help but go back to the book of Jeremiah. I come back here often because I think it's really important for our day and age. I go back to the book of Jeremiah. When Judah was taken captive into exile to Babylon, they thought that their exile would be for only 2 years. Well, why did they think that? Because there was a prophet walking around saying this will only last for 2 years. Jeremiah kept saying, no, it's going to be longer. But this false prophet was refuting Jeremiah, and he was very popular. They were excited about this 2 years. They can hold out for 2 years. They can hunker in the bunker. They'll get there. They'll just do their thing. They'll just be among themselves. They'll try not to get into the society very much. And in 2 years' time, they're back. The strategy of the Babylonians was that they would take people out of their country, bring them to Babylon, and assimilate them into their culture. It's a little bit of what the Romans did. They did it a little bit differently. What they did was they would conquer a place, and then they would make the various cities in the places that they conquered, they would make them Roman cities so that people born there were citizens. That's why Paul of Tarsus was a Roman citizen, because Tarsus was one of those cities that had been conquered and had become a Roman colony. So it's the same kind of a principle to make them assimilate. And so the Israelites were tempted to be together and not branch out into the culture at all, because they didn't want to be tainted by the culture, especially since they thought it was just going to be 2 years. But 70 years, that was a different story. See, then Jeremiah writes them a letter that says something very surprising. Thus, this is Jeremiah 29:4. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters, take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters, multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare, shalom, peace, full or peace, seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its shalom, in its welfare, you will find your welfare. Seek the welfare of the city. But Lord, these are pagans. These are evil people. They murder people. They do all kinds of unspeakable things to people. Lord, these are evil people. We need to stay away from them. They might taint us. We can't do this. And he's saying, seek the welfare of the city. This goes along with what our verse is saying. Salt acts as a preservative. It keeps meat from going bad. What Jesus is saying is that we are a preservative in our culture. Well, how do we do that? You might think that he would advocate for this we-they mentality. We're in the church, and we have that sign that says, you are now leaving for your mission field. A lot of churches have that sign, and I think we're also a mission field in here. There is no we-they kind of a deal. Sure, some of us have run to Jesus and we're justified by him, and we know him, but we still struggle. We still struggle with sin. The very message that we need, the very message that they need, which is Jesus, is the very message that we need as well. There's no we, they mentality. You might think, though, that might be what God would be calling us to. We don't want to be tainted. We're the good people. They're the bad people. We stay away from them. But no, he says that they should seek the peace of the city, the welfare of the city. And this is what he's calling us to do. In other words, what they do needs to be to make the city a better place to be. You can try to cram the gospel down everybody's throat, but most people aren't going to listen. But what if we were committed to making our community the best place it could be? It has huge implications for us. John Stott, who I quoted, quotes Robert Bella, who I've also quoted, from a Psychology Today article. Now, in fairness, I try to find these articles, and I couldn't find this one. But if John Stott said it, it's gospel for me pretty well. But this is what he says that Bella said: we should not underestimate the significance of the small group of people who have a new vision of a just and gentle world. The quality of a culture may be changed when 2% of its people have a new vision. Really? 2% of its people have a new vision. Now, Christians are supposed to make up, one way or the other, about 60% of our country. What's going on? In his book, Vanishing Grace, Philip Yancey writes about a Muslim man who told Yancey this: I've read the entire Quran and I can find in it no guidance on how Muslims should live as a minority in society. I have read the entire New Testament many times and can find in it no guidance on how Christians should live as a majority. And this is what Yancey comments: Christians best thrive as a minority, a counterculture. Historically, when Christians reach a majority, they have yielded to the temptations of power in ways that are clearly anti-gospel. This is most certainly true in America. But political power is not God's way. He puts people in power and removes them at his will, at his whim. He brings princes to naught, it says in Isaiah 40. He does what he wants. But political power is not the way. God's way is for his people to be actively involved in the culture in 1,000 ways, to not take shortcuts when it would be easy to do so, to be good workers in the workplace, to make our word our bond, to love people well by putting their needs at the forefront, to be peacemakers, to be full of compassion and humility, to look for on-purpose ways to bring peace and completeness and soundness to their surroundings because Jesus just spills from them. These are just a few ways of the millions of ways that Christians can be salt and light. Just be who you are. Be a follower of Jesus. Just be you. Seek Jesus and be you in the culture. Our society of expressive individualism is looking for personal success and fulfillment, but Christians are looking for the good of the whole, for the entire community, for the entire city. They do this because they belong to a kingdom that is not of this world, and they belong to a king who has shed his love on them. What are you doing in your culture to love well and to seek the peace of the city? Brothers and sisters, if we're going to plant churches and seek people come to Jesus, this is a step that every single one of us needs to take. Number two, Salt enhances taste. In the Journal of Biblical Counseling, Tim Keller makes this observation about salt. He says this: the job of salt was to make something taste good. I don't know about you, but I can't stand corn on the cob without salt on it. When I've eaten a piece of corn on the cob that I really like, I put it down, and what do I say? That was great salt. No, that's not what I say. I say that was a great piece of corn on the cob. Why? Because the job of the salt is not to make you think how great the salt is, but how great the thing is with which it is involved. This is pretty simple. Christians make you feel better, he concludes, but religious people always make you feel condemned. They make you feel worse. When someone comes to Christ, the Spirit of God begins to work in that person. And what is the result? Well, they begin to love better, to enjoy people more, to laugh easier, to hold things looser. They begin to dance. They're being driven by a self-centered agenda begins to fade. They begin to enjoy life and to love their neighbors, even the pesky ones. They begin to show kindness for Jesus' sake. See, Christians are people that grieve well with people that are grieving and empathize well with the hurting. They take action when there are needs. What would it take for us to have this one thing on the forefront of our thinking? I want to lighten someone's load today. I want to meet someone's need today for Jesus' sake. I want to be this salt that enhances taste, and I want to help them. It might be by meeting a need. It might be by praying for someone. It might be by a well-timed joke for laughter, or it might just be a listening ear. It's seasons. It's not the center of the story. We're not the center of it. We season, and when we get a chance, we spill Jesus. We spill Jesus. This is what enhances the taste of someone's life. A true friend. And this is what Christians are called to do, to be full of compassion and full of empathy. And they looked for opportunities to bring a full-orbed peace. One of the meanings for salt in the Greek, which is the word halos, is for salt. One of the meanings as it applies to people is this: Christians are called, it's winsome or witty. Winsome or witty. Christians are called to be winsome, to be lighthearted, not always being the heavy in the room, to confess easily when confronted, to speak words of love and joy and faith, and yes, to speak Jesus. This is what it means to enhance taste. If we're always the heavy in the room pointing out what's wrong with everything, then we're not enhancing taste. We're becoming the center point. It becomes about the salt. I wonder if we live up to that billing. I don't live up to it too well. That's the truth. But Jesus certainly did. He certainly did. Number 3, salt makes you thirsty. Here's a truth that I think is a non-negotiable. It's a fact. Everyone is thirsty. Everyone is thirsty. What do I mean by that? I mean that everyone is born with a hole in their soul, with a restlessness, with desires that are not satisfied, with a deep thirst that they keep trying to quench. This longing for something. When Adam and Eve were put out of Eden, where they had everything their hearts could desire, all completely satisfied. When they were put out of the Garden of Eden, they longed for Eden for the rest of their lives, and they've put that into us, and we are all longing for an Eden. I was going to bring a painting that I got from Alan Folger right there and show it to you because it evokes longing in me, longing of wanting to be where it's a woods scene, longing to be there. Hangs on my wall at home very proudly. We all have these things. We're all longing. They're even for those who are in Christ, we have a restlessness. Everyone is born with this. And people have tried to fill this hole in so many ways. They keep trying to quench their thirst. We all keep trying to quench our thirst. And in today's climate, thirst quenching revolves around that term, expressive individualism. I can quench that thirst if I look deep inside my own soul and I see and I find out who I really am, then I can actually quench that thirst. And it goes something like this: I will quench this thirst by pampering myself, or by pursuing as much pleasure as I can, or by doing what I think is right, or by looking out for myself and doing things for me, by looking deep inside and embracing everything that I feel, because what I feel is what's true for me. I will not be with people that bring me down and are not there to help me discover myself. And I'm sure you could come up with a few yourself, but there is such a problem with this, not just biblically. There are so many secular studies that show that this is erroneous thinking. It's not just the Bible, it's out there everywhere. There's a study by the University of Chicago School of Business, and I'm talking about, these are all within the last decade or last 5 years. There's a study by the University of Chicago. It concluded that selfishness leads to short-term gains but long-term regrets. The University of Zurich did a study about generosity in 2016, and the conclusion was that even small acts of generosity led to a boost in well-being. A study by Moore and Wingquist concluded that self-focus is linked to anxiety and depression, and they're on and on and on. There was a whole list of them when I looked it up. A giant list of them. It's not just Christians who are saying that this expressive individualism is not working. It's not working. You won't quench your thirst by looking inside and doing what you feel. See, what's my point? We as Christians don't actually make people thirsty, but we can make them realize just how thirsty they are. And how do we do that? Well, it starts with the joy of having our own thirst quenched. It starts with the joy of having our own thirst quenched. And when that happens, people see it. But my question to all of you brothers and sisters is, are we getting our thirst quenched? Or are we very similar to the culture that is trying to satisfy its thirst in so many ways that don't ultimately satisfy? In the Gospel of John, chapter 4, Jesus is sitting by a well speaking with a Samaritan woman. People had come to this well. They came to this well every day to get water. She came at noon because she was an outcast. But even though they would quench their thirst with water, they had to come every single day to get water for the day. Obviously, you drink water, you get thirsty again. It's a continual process of needing to quench your thirst, of needing to drink water. It wouldn't last. But then Jesus says to this woman, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So we know where the true water is, right? The water that will quench the burning in our souls, the burning that we have tried to quench in so many different ways. Do we wonder why our culture is not thirsty for Jesus? I would propose to you that it's because we are not thirsty for Jesus. So often the church is not that different from the culture. We solve our problems through our own means, through our money. We're critical of those around us. We are still trying to protect our reputations. We're desperate to be noticed. We're desperate for fulfillment. We have tried everything under the sun, but it doesn't work. We have anxiety. We have fear. We have all of these things. And Jesus says, drink the water that I give you, and you will never thirst again. Is that just a bunch of nonsense? You might think it is, except for one thing. Jesus believed it so much, and he knew that the only way that would be true is that he would have to walk a lonely, long road to a cross and give his life for people like the woman at the well and like you and like me. People that look to satisfy their thirst in the most convenient well that's nearby. Never mind that it's contaminated. And he was talking to the woman at the well, and he knew very well what would bring her peace, and he didn't back away. He actually followed through. He walked that lonely road. He died alone on the cross so that you and I might have our thirst quenched. Have you had your thirst quenched this morning? He offers himself to those who are broken down in the desert, and they're so thirsty that they begin to drink from the radiator of their vehicle. He offers himself to those who have been marooned out at sea and are half out of their minds, so they drink seawater. He offers himself to those that have looked for satisfaction in every conceivable place and have ended up worse than they were before. He says, come to me, and I will give you rivers of living water. Jesus declared on the cross that it is finished, that he paid for all of our waywardness, and he offers it to us free of charge. Rest, satisfaction, belonging, joy. It's not about me. It's about what he's done for me. Brothers and sisters, this brings rest to the soul. It is the message that our culture is longing for. Being self-centered only brings restlessness and deep thirst. But when Jesus becomes the center, there is true rest, and thirst is quenched. Vedran Smajolic was a cellist in Sarajevo. You may have heard this story. He was heartbroken by the war there that had ravaged his country. And during the siege of Sarajevo in the early 90s, more than 10,000 people were killed. And the citizens lived in constant fear. Fear of the shelling, fear of the snipers, while they struggled every day to find food and water. Well, Smolik lived near one of the few working bakeries where a long line of people had gathered when a shell came and exploded. You may remember that. He rushed to the scene, and he was overcome with grief at the carnage. For the next 22 days, one day for each victim of the bombing, he decided to challenge the ugliness of war with his only weapon, beauty. he became known as the cellist of Sarajevo. He played his music every day in front of that bakery. And after that, Smajlovic continued to unleash the beauty of his music in graveyards, at funerals, in the rubble of buildings, and in the sniper-infested streets. And although completely vulnerable, he was never shot. It was as if the beauty of his presence repelled the violence of war. His music created an oasis amid the horror. It offered hope to the people of Sarajevo and a vision of beauty to the soldiers who were destroying the city. Brothers and sisters, in so many ways, we are the cellists of Sarajevo. But the beauty we bring is Jesus. And there's nothing more beautiful. Who quenches thirst, who gives us purpose and hope. This is the beauty that we bring to the world as we season it and as we preserve it. It's Jesus and only Jesus. That's the gospel, and it changes everything. Let's pray.